Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Yes Corner. Oh, we must be on 13, I think. Math, unlucky for you, is Yes Corner 13. And thanks everyone for joining us. I'm really pleased to have Math from English Scots for Yes on. Kevin, who I'm sure you all know as Mr. Independence Live, about a year ago said, William, these are the most important group. This is the most important group that we have in the Yes movement. So I'm delighted to be able to get Math on. Math, if you'd like to just come and join us on screen. How are you doing?
Hi there. Thanks very much for having me in. As you can see, I'm streaming YouTube live from my bedroom, so excuse the mess behind me. My green screen isn't working today. Usually it's mountains and prettiness.
Yeah, oh no. What a world we live in where we can't get the green screen working. So thanks very much for joining us. What I'd love to do is to ask you some questions from our audience, as well as some of the kind of questions I've got lined up for you. The first question I wanted to know is, can you tell us a little bit how English Scots for Yes got started and how long you've been involved?
Involved with English Scots for Yes, I presume. As the founder, forever. I'm one of the co-founders of English Scots for Yes. We started in 2013. I was an SNP councillor at the time, and I was looking around to try and see what I could do for the Yes movement. And I thought, what more can I do for the Yes movement? And I'm an English Scots person, so I thought I'll talk to the English Scots for Yes group. And there wasn't one, so we had to found it. Excuse the noise in the background. That's my toddler who's just decided to be the most inconvenient time to come and get her. So
okay,
yeah,
so
I started the group in 2013. Yeah, we launched the group outside the Scottish Parliament. We had a launch event, and then we campaigned through the referendum, and we've been going ever since then, basically.
Okay, great. And how important do you think it is that we've got a group, English Scots for Yes, in the movement? And do you feel that kind of the onus is on you? The onus is on you more than some of the other Yes groups that we have.
I think that we have a very difficult job because the average Yes group has to try and convince people to vote yes, and that's the idea. And the average population of Scotland, if you look at the population of Scotland, depending on the polls you look at, it's around 45 to 50% of the people in Scotland want to vote for independence. Some say 45, some say 55, most are somewhere in the middle. If you look at English Scots, it's about 75% no. So from the get-go, we've got a more difficult job to take us there. But I think it's a very important job because if you look at the statistics from 2013, 2014, before the referendum, it was 80%. At the referendum, it became about 70%, but about 70% of English Scots voted no. And the reason why that's significant is if you remove the English Scots from the equation, we'd have won in 2014. And it's important. We obviously can't do that. And I'm not suggesting for a second we would do that, because if you live in Scotland, you get a say over Scotland's constitutional future. That's the most important thing. But, if we'd managed to convince 50% of English Scots to vote yes, then we would have won. So I think it's a very important group to try and bring that group over, because literally if the entire rest of the Yes movement did nothing and we just got 50% to vote yes, we'd have won. So that's a very important reason for English Scots for Yes to be here. But on top of that, I think it shows the broad sort of forward-thinking internationalist outlook of the Yes movement, that the unionists would say, independence is just anti-Englishness. It's all about being against the English. And hold on a minute, the people who actually live in Scotland and are English, quite a lot of them want to vote yes. There's a group for them and everything. They've got campaigners, they've got MSPs. So I think it helps rebut the unionists lie there a little bit to a degree, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is to try and make sure as many English Scots vote yes as possible. And we have seen them polls moving as well. It's now about 65 to 70. In 2013, it was about 80. So we're getting there. Another couple of years, and we'll get them all.
That's a positive spin on what are quite depressing numbers when you look at it. We might have we've got a comment from Wayne here. I was born and have always lived in Scotland, born to a Scottish father and an English mother. Can I join this group?
Yes, we're a very welcoming group.
There you go, Wayne.
And not just saying that because we need members, although we do, but we've got about 1,700 at the moment. The reason we came into existence, there's three sort of English Scots for yes sort of types. I say types, but anyone can join. But if you've got a connection to England, but where we kind of look at things, there's people like me who are English family, or we've got some Scottish relatives, English family, born in England, moved to Scotland as an adult. There's people like my partner who has a Scottish family, but was born in England and came to Scotland as a child. Her dad was in the Navy, and she moved back home when she was about 4 months old, I think. But she's still English. She was born there. If Scotland and England had been independent at the time, she'd have gotten a passport, quite rightly. So there's them. And then there's people who are born in Scotland and consider themselves fully Scottish, but have an English family. So that's like the sort of the three main archetypes of our group. And all of them have that connection with England, but ultimately we're all Scots, because if you live and work in Scotland, you're a Scot. Whether you came here yesterday or you've lived your entire life here and you just happen to have an English mum, you're still a Scot. So, and you're entitled to feel English as well. So we wanted to make sure that people who are English Scots felt welcome and felt part of the movement. Part of the reason we actually set up was in 2013, I had a lot of people coming up to me saying, Matthew, you're English and you're SMB. I don't think I'm welcome to speak about Scotland and Scottish independence because I'm English and I just live here. I was like, then you're a Scot because you live here. You get as much say over this. There are people saying, why can't Scottish people in England vote on Scottish independence? Because you don't live here. If you fair enough, it might be annoying if you only just move down there and suddenly the country goes independent and you don't get a say. I get that. But equally, you could have moved there 80 years ago and never had a single thought about Scotland ever since. So it's about the people who live and work in Scotland. So if you've got English heritage and you're for independence and you live in Scotland, join.
Fantastic.
Buy a t-shirt.
It's really interesting because I think that just if you didn't do anything else, it's the fact that you've got an English Scots for yes. And it is, as you said, going out to not just the movement, but to the whole country and wider than that, and saying, of course, there's English Scots, there's Jamaican Scots, there's Bangladeshi Scots, and this is the whole point of it. When I said to my partner, who is an English Scot for yes, she was born, doesn't live in Scotland at the moment, but voted in the last referendum, yes. It is that she went, oh, can you be an English Scot? I said, of course you can. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do, and it is so different when you're looking at it through a prism, an English prism, that it's quite. It can seem obvious to us, but it doesn't make as much sense to people who are outside Scotland because of the inclusiveness of the movement.
I think it's actually interesting the way you said the English prism and outside of Scotland. If you're outside of Scotland in the rest of the entire world, it makes perfect sense. I was interviewed in 2014 for an American TV show, and they were like, oh yeah, so you guys are a bit like the Irish Americans, only you're English Scots. And they got it instantly because America's a melting pot. Everywhere else in the world got it just fine. English media were baffled. Why don't you like England? I love England. It's a lovely place. I go on holiday there. I've got family there. Of course I like England. I just don't want people in London we don't vote for making our government, and so it's interesting that it's very interesting the way I suppose everything in the Scottish independence movement is filtered not through an English prism, but through a London prism. London doesn't understand why anyone wouldn't want to be ruled by London. They think everything's awesome there. And so when they see a group like us, it's kind of like a counterpoint to it removes one of their little taglines about it's just they just hate English before their independence move. Hold on, they are English.
I would like to come back to that. But I think a really important point, again, talking on it seems a little bit strange from a particular perspective. I live in Catalonia, and I could live here for 40 years, and I will never be able to vote in a general election because I'm not Spanish. And that's, there's a lot of the franchise in Europe is in general different from what we've got in Scotland. That you need to live in the place to be able to vote and have that proper representation. So even from a European spectrum, it can still seem amazing what a group like you is doing, and what Scotland as a country is doing is being really inclusive. So we've spoke a little bit about the past. Now that we are kind of back in a little bit more of getting together in a physical world, and rallies and static rallies and all that stuff that's happening now. Have you got any ideas on what the groups, apart from trying to sell more T-shirts, going to do for the rest of the year?
We're really sort of trying to establish our organisational stuff on a more steady footing, because we've kind of lurched from disaster to disaster. Not disaster, but we've kind of lurched from reacting to things, because we've been trying to do something and then rallies are coming along. Oh, got to do the rallies, and then this is coming along. Oh, got to do that. And you sort of, it's very easy as a smaller group to sort of always be on the brink of not having enough money to do things, and always having to raise money for this thing, and then you've done that thing and the money's gone. And I mean, in indie life, that you guys know exactly how this works. You've always got to have a constant stream of funding coming in, and it's always not quite enough to do the things you'd like to do. So I think we need to sort of organise a bit more in terms of that. COVID really did knock a sort of hole in everyone's plans for everything, and we're no different. In terms of what we'd like to do once rallies properly start up, I know there's a couple happening in the next month or so. I don't think we're going to be doing much for that, but once after the summer's done, I think we're going to start to see more and more people feeling confident, people feeling like we can go to these things. I think I really want us to concentrate. I'd rather spend our energies in the next 6 months making sure that come spring next year we're really in a fighting position, because there is coming an IndieRef. And IndieRef is happening now. There's no doubt about this.
Yeah,
and we need to make sure we can fight it.
That's a great point, Matt, and I hope that people watching who are in other Yes groups take that on board. And there is a rush to get back out and do stuff, but every group needs to take stock and think, how can we win this referendum? That's more important than getting back. And if you've got to choose between those two things, so you're talking not that much in terms of planning this year, but getting stuck back into it next year, and the hopefully builds up to a referendum.
Well, I think we're planning things, but they're more internally sort of oriented about how we can what we can do to begin campaigning for independence. Rallies, we love rallies. I absolutely adore going to a march and a rally and having our stall, and we give out cakes for anyone who's never been to an English Scots. For everyone who's never been to a Yes rally or a Yes march, you will have seen us. We've got the big stall, and we give away loads of cakes, because we give away tea and cakes because we're English. It's a gimmick, but people love us, and they oh yeah, one of the English Scots. Yes, cool.
That may explain why AGM 0405 has said that the most popular banner was always the English Scots for Yes. That's because of the cakes, and then followed by the Rangers and Celtic one. But that's a really important point. You are popular because it's not what people expect of the movement, in the same way that people don't expect to see Rangers and Celtic supporters together supporting Yes. So what you're doing is so powerful because of that. I've got a question for you, Matt, I'd love you to have a look at here. I've just put it up on the screen. Can you see that?
Do you think the Northern Independence Party in the north of England could be a viable movement? Do you think it could make an independent Scotland less or more possible or less possible? Well, put aside the fact that you don't have more possible. Possible is an intangible. It's always yes or no. Putting that aside, my grammar smarts aside.
There you go.
I think that independence for Northern England is a tricky one, and I'm not going to say yes or no to whether they should be independent or not. I think that's entirely up to the people of Northern England. I think that it's inevitable once Scotland becomes independent. I don't think that the North of England is going to become an independent state before Scotland becomes independent. I think we're well, the train's moving a lot faster in Scotland. But I do think that once Scotland becomes independent, we're going to see more of this sort of thing. Fair enough. We're going to see more of this sort of thing emerging, and I think that's healthy in a way, because I think that London-centric politics in the UK have poisoned the well for an awful lot of things. If you go to the north of England has worse SIMD stats than most parts of Scotland. North of England became an economic black hole where nothing was done for years. Thatcher just looked at the north of England as an annoyance that they were allowed to vote as well. So the north of England's got huge systemic problems that need solved by something. And I think that post-independence, when they see Scotland going and making a great run of things, and they see Wales leaving as Wales surely will, Cymru Anian Abyth. Once you see that happening, I think the north of England's going to be going either give us more money, London, or we're out of here as well, because there's no reason to, England as a country, yes, it's existed since, before the Middle Ages. But England as an identity doesn't have to stop being an identity just because of where government is. I mean, Scandinavia is the lesson in part of that. The idea of being Swedish, Finnish, Danish, Norwegian, some of them are actually quite new concepts. You know, they all belong to the Danish crown at various points. So it's not like England has to stay one country. Cornwall, for instance, was never formally part of England. So yeah, I think that independence for Northern England could happen. I don't think it makes Scottish independence more or less likely, because I think we're going to have it before that even happens. But the best of luck to anyone in that position, because, you know, democracy and self-determination are right. So good luck to them, but I'm not going to say yes or no, because I think that would be wrong for me to do that.
Well done for remembering both parts of that question.
Sorry, I'm impressed. Well.
I'm impressed. I'd love to know the viewers' thoughts on that, because I think it is quite an important question. I think it's just over the last 48 hours, but the government said HS2 is not going to come up to the north now. It's too expensive, and everyone's saying, hold on a minute, what about this kind of levelling up and regional investment? And for as long as I've got a lot of family in Yorkshire.
Brilliant. Boris won his election. He got his majority. He doesn't need to worry about the north of England again.
Yeah, I think there's evidence for that now. But when I was growing up in my kind of teens and my early 20s, I've got a lot of family in Yorkshire, and I was very strongly pro-independence. And even then I would say to them, look, you get more power if Scotland becomes independent, because you'll start to see what we're able to do. And for me, a solution for independence, Scottish independence, is a solution for the huge problems, the systemic problems that the United Kingdom has, not just the nations, but the regions. So I hope this leads to much more democracy across the islands. Okay, I've got another question here for. Well, there you go.
For Matt, why have you got a more Scottish sounding surname than I have? Well, my family are English, but my grandfather was Scottish, although he was born in England. He was born to Scottish parents, and then moved to Wales, because, that's how families moved around in the early part. Sturgis is actually a Norse name. So my full name is Matt Campbell Sturgis. So, yeah, Sturgis is Dorgas, so it's from the Old Icelandic. There you go.
Oh, brilliant. Wayne, what's your second name? Because we just know you as Wayne, so we'll have a second name, Scottish second name off. I remember,
Smith, we're going to have a good laugh.
I remember, Matt, I went to, when I was at university, my first kind of politics tutorial, we went round and everyone said their name, and I was William Thompson. I was very strongly pro-independent, and the guy next to me, his name was Robert R. McGregor. And I can just remember feeling so jealous that we were in the Scottish politics class next to that man. Okay, any more questions? Please keep them coming. That's great. One of the things we like to highlight every week on Yes Corner is when Yes groups have worked together, when they've done other things with other groups. So I'd like to know if you've got any kind of any thoughts on that, in the past or moving forward. And someone said, have you registered for the Day of Action that Believe in Scotland are organising? I think it's the 18th of September. So that's one of those double questions for you.
Hadn't heard about it, so if someone can ping in the details, that would be great. You can email admin@englishscotsvs.org, or just through the chat here. That would be helpful. The first question was, yes, what do Yes groups do together? Well, I mean, English Scots VS, we actually founded, we're never going to have a national, we don't have a local nexus anywhere in Scotland, because there are English people all over Scotland. But we don't have a big enough national appeal or user base, I suppose, to really be able to campaign nationwide. So we've always kind of been piggybacking on other groups, and that's maybe how it has to be. In terms of what we've done with other groups, during the first referendum, we supplied, I think it was 180,000 leaflets to pretty much every Yes group in Scotland, every Yes, SNP, Green, and I think Scottish Socialist group got some of our leaflets, and we went pretty much everywhere that people asked for an English Scots VS representative. We found someone for them. If they wanted a speaker, we found someone, and if they couldn't find anyone, it was usually muggins. So I did travel quite a bit in 2014, and since then we've done the same thing. In terms of what we do going forwards, I mean, we've organised things. Since there was a protest outside the UK government foothold in Edinburgh just before they moved to the new one. We organised that. In terms of what we are doing going forwards, I'd very much like to see us putting together a Yes Welcome Pack. This is something we've been planning before COVID, and then the money ran out in COVID, where we give people leaving England for Scotland, emigrating to Scotland because of Brexit, effectively wanting a more progressive government, seeing Boris Johnson and the Tories. There is actually a determined movement of people moving to Scotland, and we've actually put together this plan to have a sort of Yes Welcome package, like a Welcome to Scotland thing. There were a couple of jokey things in there, like a little a booklet explaining how to pronounce places in Scotland, some examples of Scottish produce where we were going to get little jam jars and tablet and things like that, and also, you know, slightly more serious things, explaining the politics of Scotland, explaining some of the history, why things are the way they are, because it's really hard to punch through that media sort of propaganda almost, where the SNP hate all the English people and are just mad. The Greens are all tofu eating sandal wearers that are also equally mad. The Socialists are all insane. Labour, the only real party that, you know, there is a determined media effort to paint things differently. So people arriving in Scotland from England, we sometimes have to punch through that. They might be leaving England because they don't like the kind of way things are going there, and that's understandable. But we still need to sort of reach out to them and say, hey, look, you're welcome. We're not going to propaganda it. Here's some of the history. We'll try and be as neutral and politically, you know, independent as possible. That sort of thing.
That is a great idea, and I know if you contact the Scottish Independence Foundation, they'd love to hear from you, because they might be able to put some money.
We were talking with them, in fact, before COVID. I think we need to. The level of funding required for it is possibly beyond them, but it is something we are looking to do, if only in small scale. There was a recipe book built for it and everything.
We've actually got Independence Live has got a new cookery show that starts next month, so maybe we can get you involved in that one. In terms of scale, one of the things that I'd thought of a few years ago, you know, my background as an events and comms person, is that it's so difficult for us to get coverage when we go on marches and when we traipse around the streets of Scotland. It's really difficult to do, and I thought a really good idea would be going to a few English towns and setting up move to Scotland stall, you know, with this kind of progressive leafleting and this, you know, and giving stuff away, and just trying to get a little bit more coverage of what it is that makes Scotland different. And, you know, I think I've not met anyone in the movement who doesn't like English people. It's just complete fallacy. In Scotonomics, we've had more English guests on our economics podcast than we have from anywhere else on the planet, you know, and it's just not a movement that is so insular like that. And any more questions? An interesting one for you here, Math, is Wayne, his second name is Smith, actually, so you definitely do win that one. And he says honest, he's not just doing it for comedy value. What more do you think the movement can do to highlight what you're doing? How can the people who are watching, how can they help, you know, a really, really important message that you have in a really important group? What more can we do to help you?
Besides buying more t-shirts, in terms of what we can do, I mean, obviously, like all Yes Groups, we need funding. So when we put up crowdfunders and stuff, please give generously if you can, but don't feel you have to. No, in terms of what we can actually do, one of the most important things is speak to your friends, because during the referendum, we had a lot of people saying, no, I don't want to get involved in the independence cause because I'm English and I live in Scotland and I've done 20 years, but I don't want people to get upset at me because I'm English and think it's none of my business. And yet when you actually reach out to them and say, yeah, no, talk to English people, talk to English Scots in Scotland and say, no, you're welcome, your voice is important, even if they're no voters, particularly if they're no voters, because we lost. We lost in 2014, and the reason we lost is because not enough people voted yes. So the only way of changing that is to speak to people who voted no. Speak to them and say, look, I know you're English. I value your opinion. Your contribution to Scotland's important. What do you think about independence? How can I change your mind? How can I get you to the... You know, and if you do that, we will give you the resources. We will give you the talking points, leaflets, you know, T-shirts. We'll give you everything you can to sort of talk to fellow English Scots like us and say, you know, what do you want from Scotland? What do you want Scotland to be? And here's how we think Scotland could become that under independence. And if you can't talk to them, or you don't want to talk to them, send them our way. We'll talk to them. It's what we do. We sit down and talk to people and say, yeah, okay, you're radical. You're not really left of centre. You're a bit right of centre. You don't really like the idea of Scotland becoming independent because you think it's going to be some socialist republic. It's not. It's going to stay pretty centrist because that's the way politics works. Here's what might happen post-independence. And you actually allay their fears a little bit that, it's suddenly going to become some sort of weird Marxist state, or the independence cause is going to run all the English people out of Scotland. And, nonsense like that, it's pervasive because they've never actually talked to anyone in the movement about it. So talk to people. That's the most important thing you can do to support us. That's a long answer. Sorry.
No, that's a perfect answer. And again, that would be a good way to sum up a lot of the conversations we have on Yes Corner is talking to people. And what we have found when we're speaking about veterans or English Scots is that a lot of people are minded to vote for independence, but they don't feel that other people like them are already voting for independence. And you're right, the more conversations you have, and I think the more awareness that this group has, the much more impact it can have with people from outside Scotland who are living in Scotland.
It's an inclusiveness thing. We're a very inclusive group, not just because we need the members to sell T-shirts to. We're inclusive because we want to bring people with us. It's a journey that Scotland's going to. Our group slogan, shamelessly stolen from a great Asian Scot, is that, whose name I can't remember. Late Asian Scot was our first MSP that was Asian Scots. Bashir Ahmed. He said, it's not about where you were born, it's where we're going together as a country. And that's very true. And it's an inclusive sort of, we bring people in. That's actually, that interview I spoke of on American TV, I found out incidentally afterwards. It was actually live. It was Good Morning America. I was live in front of 115 million people. I'm glad I found that out afterwards.
Yeah.
But when I was in that thing, one of the things they said to us is, this seems strange. You want to split up the UK. You want to become insular, and, you want to become isolationist, because there's some people in America that would like America to be more isolationist. Good host, actually. And they said, why do you want that? And I said, no, we don't want that. We want the opposite. We want Scotland to become more outwards looking. At the moment, we can only look as far as London, and then we're told the rest of the world is their preserve. We're not to do any more. We're not to go and talk to other countries. We're not to reach out to the European Union or elsewhere in the world. We're only allowed to look as far as London. Scotland wants to look across the entire world, and to do that, we need to be more outwards looking. And that's kind of where English Scots VS allows us to break through some of those internal barriers that the media and the establishment in England, that London really, that likes to say, oh yeah, the independence movement's just anti-English people. That's how we get past that. That's how we leapfrog that and say to people in Germany, for instance, the German Scots for yes, or Polski Dans, can't remember the last line. It means Polish people for yes. There's Polish people who live in Poland but have Scottish relatives or Scottish friends, etc. There's groups all across the planet that want Scotland to be independent. They think that we can do better. That's how we reach that. There's another long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, for those who are watching, I said, I think it's really important that we do encourage people to, watch interviews like this and, retweet the things that are on your Twitter page, and just say to people, it's okay to be English and vote for independence, because voting for independence is not anti-English. And I think that's a really, really important message we need to get across.
In fact, the actual message of voting independence is anti-English. In actual fact, if you care about England, vote for independence in Scotland, because it will force the UK government to become more focused on the parts of England they currently neglect. Scotland's gotten all this attention. The last 7 years, Scotland's had more acts passed in the UK Parliament than in 50 before it. The Scotland Act got revised about 5 or 6 times because of independence. Once independence is done and we're gone, the UK government then can't ignore Northern England. It can't ignore the Midlands. It can't ignore Birmingham. It can't ignore the problems that they have in Norfolk and going up the East Coast. There's all sorts of things that the UK government likes to ignore. By focusing on Scottish independence in some ways, they get to shuffle off and ignore Northern England. So yeah, if you care about England.
That is a really powerful point, and it's completely true, and there's evidence for that, you know, and what you're saying and what the movement does as general. Well, Matt, thank you very much for spending half an hour with us. Just to let you know, there wasn't 150 million people watching, so you're all right. I'm sure we'll get up. I'm sure we'll get up to 150 in the next 24 hours, but not 150 million. Thanks so much. I'll make sure I'll forward you a link as soon as we're done to the Believe in Scotland National Action Day. Independence Live. Independence Live is going to be doing a lot around that as well.
I had heard about it, but I couldn't find the actual details. Sometimes that's a problem we face as well. We need groups to have more official platforms. Incidentally, if anyone tweets at this point saying the English Scots for Yes webpage is currently down, yes, we know. Yes, we've been hacked again. Yes, we get hacked every couple of months. We'll move to a new server again. Thank you to the people in London who keep hacking our website.
Well, hopefully my mate Dave will be able to help. Who runs the Yes Hub. All right, mate. Thanks so much for joining us, and
not at all. Thanks for
your time tonight. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks on Yes Corner. Thanks so much. Bye now.